So, Pam and Garth, take us back to the beginning. Where did your boating start?
I had done a small amount of dinghy sailing and done basic RYA courses many years ago, and that was about it. And then we decided, when we were on holiday in Italy in 2015, that we were going to buy a boat.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so my background was my dad had boats, and he had a speedboat in Abersock years ago, and then he actually lived in the Bahamas for a few years, and he had a little Bertram 28.
Oh, nice! I love the boat.
What was that? 26. It was a 26. That's right. It was a 26, not a 28. And so that was a lovely little boat. Before that, he'd had a sort of motorboat in the Mediterranean when I was a youngster, and that was a steel-hulled ex-motor torpedo boat with a Picchiotti hull.
Wow.
Custom built, and we bought it at the Cannes Boat Show like many years after it had been built, and it was unloved, but he loved it. So I didn't really take any interest in boating at all until we were thinking of doing a house extension, a big one, which meant we weren't going to be able to stay in the house. And that was at that point I said, well, why don't we buy a boat that we can actually stay on for a few months while the work's being done? Because I was in my noodle now that I wanted a boat. And so, yeah. And so I had a plan that we should get maybe something about 50 foot, 55 feet, something like that, with a fly bridge, and just good enough for two people, and it'd be nice and keep it out in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, and I think we'd looked at lots of yachting sites and seen princesses. I think it was a 53-foot princess we had in our mind. That's what we thought. And so a friend of ours put us in touch with a yacht broker in Mallorca, and we spoke to him, and he said, well, look, the best thing is come out and have a look at some boats. So we did.
We flew out, and he showed us, and this was the time, I can't remember what time. April? Was it April time, or
no? It was,
end of the year.
It was the opposite. It was September.
October. So a lot of the boats have been put to bed. So he knew what he was doing. He showed us around some winterized boats where they're all closed up, the cushions are all inside, and all the rest of it. They fitted the bill perfectly, and he said, there's a wild card I'd like to take you up to the north of the island and show you something else. He introduced us up there to a Predator 72, which didn't fit any of the bill. It was A, way out of our budget, B, didn't have the fly bridge, C, was too long by a country mile.
But it was immaculate, beautifully presented, and it appealed to every aesthetic, I think, that I just didn't even know that I found appealing.
Right. Okay.
And,
So that was it.
That's the trouble, isn't it? Boats are not rational, are they?
No.
And I think there is always a danger of falling in love with something, and then.
I think what I've learned since then, and it was a fantastic boat to have, but what I've learned since then, and having had a number of boats, is that actually you can take a boat that might look a little unloved and make it feel very loved, and just that actually doesn't take that much effort to do. But I was a complete novice, really, completely naive, and fell hook, line and sinker for the fact that the Predator was beautiful.
Yeah.
And
It was, and the owner was on it,
Yeah.
the skipper was on it, but we didn't have any training whatsoever. And we'd had no formal training at this stage, and so we jumped straight in. We bought it, and we then, for the next 2.5 years, I think we loved it and lived on it for 6 months a year for 2 years.
So you had that in the Med?
I had it in the Med in Mallorca.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an ambitious starting point, I have to say.
Well, I didn't realise it was ambitious, because I was
think
sold.
that's the naivety.
I didn't realise how. In the end, it had a bow thruster and two engines, and so I was shown how to drive it and taught how to use it, and away we began. Of course, we did get it proper instruction and proper qualifications.
Yes, we did.
And but in the second year, we decided to take it around the Mediterranean, because I thought all my friends and the other guys that I knew, they were taking it out of the marina, 2 miles down the road to a beach, spending the day on the beach, and coming back.
Which was lovely.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
But
And we also used it as a home, and so it was great. But I thought, this boat needs to travel. So we planned, therefore, I as a child, I'd spent some time in Malta, about 7 years when I was growing up. So I thought, well, it'd be nice to get out to Malta, and while we're at it, we'll circumnavigate Sicily. And so we did. So we went from Mallorca to Menorca, over to Sardinia around to Sicily, round Sicily to Malta, and then up through the Straits of Messina. Went to Capri and
we did the
Stromboli,
Aeolian Islands
and Corsica, and
Yeah.
and that was all in about 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah,
and,
it was incredible.
A lovely journey, and
we had friends and family dipping in and out,
Yeah.
flying in and joining us in places.
Nice.
and that sort of worked. But my learning from that, we had to do it in August.
Right. Right.
So 2 things. One was marina fees were extortionate.
Yeah.
And secondly, it's not like I could afford to not have marinas booked just in case the weather was foul at any moment in time. Whilst I wanted to spend time at anchor, and a lot of the places you couldn't do it anyway, it just wasn't feasible. So we need to book all these things a long time in advance. And we did, and then we had to do it in August because of our friends that were joining from Australia. They could only make it in August, so that was one of the challenges for us. So next time I do the Mediterranean, it wouldn't be August.
Right.
It possibly be late September, early October, when the weather,
It was
when
just
it's beautiful
too hot
weather.
and too crowded.
Yeah, it's too hot, too crowded, too expensive.
Yeah. And did you have a crew on that boat, or was it just yourselves?
No, it's just us.
Wow.
So
That is really impressive, actually, genuinely, to go, right, we're going to buy a 72-foot boat, never had one before, right, we're going to head off around the Med in it now, all on your own. That's.
I think that's the naivety.
we had it a year and a half before we did that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we
You built up the experience
and we'd
first.
spent time on it. I mean, because we'd spent 6, 8, 9 months living aboard it.
Yeah.
And taking it out regularly. So and losing anchors and then having to replace them and things like so.
we did.
A lot of things that had gone wrong.
We learned a lot.
We
didn't
learned a lot on that trip. But it was when we sold that. Eventually, we did sell it because it became that a little constraining to live on for such a long time with so many guests coming on board, especially if the weather was inclement and we had nothing else to do. We would drive our car out there in April, May, and then drive it back in September, October. So with Brexit, that's no longer possible for us to spend that length of time. But by this stage, we'd already decided to move into a villa and have a day boat, and we bought a windy 39 Chimera.
Oh, nice.
From you, we had that, and that was a really nice boat. And just had. I was very, very sad to see the first boat go, and I don't really want to go into a villa, but we did it, and we did it for 2 or 3 years, and after that it was a case of we are just continually repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
We've constantly got people. It's beautiful, it's lovely, we're very privileged and all the rest of it. However, it would be nice to have a change of scenery from time to time. So we exited Mallorca completely, and decided to get an expedition type boat where we could go places. And I think the toss-up was between this and a Nordhaven.
I was just about to say, did you
Yeah.
consider Nordhaven? Because everybody, I was talking to Jim Davison, and this is his dream boat.
Yeah.
He really wants a Fleming. But he said to me, do I buy a Fleming or do I buy a Nordhaven? Nobody seems to buy one without at least considering the other.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. And we did. One of the clinchers on this was price point. So I think it needs to be said also that Pam had to be dragged screaming and kicking to have to entertain the thought of this boat. It's so different from a Sunseeker, Fairline, Princess type of mould, which all have their place and are beautiful in their own way. But this provides you with different kinds of qualities and in a traditional format, and its seakeeping capabilities are one of the key things for me when we were going to be doing our boating primarily based from the UK.
Yes.
So
that was an emphatic yes there.
Well,
that
when
was a
Garth
challenge.
first told me that he wanted to look at a Fleming, or we'd looked at many boats online, we'd gone onto Aquaholic, we'd done the whole thing, and we thought we decided on buying a boat, and a sort of another Gin Palace type boat, a Princess, but we were going to base
wasn't it the
it.
78 that you took a?
Yeah, it was a
Did you
Princess.
take a holiday on a 78?
Oh,
charter?
it was a 72. It was a
72.
Princess 72.
Princess 72. We really liked that.
Yeah.
And we looked at that,
Yeah.
and we thought maybe that would work, and we were thinking about having a boat in the UK. So we thought about it, and I think I got my head set into that. And so when Garth said, really, I'm not sure that's the right boat for what we want to try and do. We won't be able to go and explore. We won't, it won't enable us to do that. And I was, I suppose, quite resistant. And we went to look at a Fleming in Antibes when we were out at the Cannes Boat Show.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and just said, I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
I spent.
And you said to me, well, okay, so what would you change? And I said, well, how long a list would you like? And I, at which point Garth rolled his eyes, and we walked off the
Pretty
boat.
much what I just did. Yeah.
And that was and that was the end of that.
And that
boat.
was that conversation.
That was that.
Do you know? Because
So-
I'd walked on board that boat, and it had been the same owner since new, and unfortunately the gentleman had died. And a year later, his family were due to sell it, and the skipper who had been with the original owner all that time, he basically told me the story of it all, and I sat there enraptured for an hour while Pam went round compiling this list of things that needed to be changed. And so I finished at the end of it. I said, it's perfect, it's lovely, let's buy it. And she said, well, we need to do it. Anyway, so that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so when we came back to the UK, we looked at, and we got in touch with the guys here at Fleming Europe.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I think I'd like to buy one. And so if anything comes up, let me know. And they said, absolutely, and wrote my name down. So, of course, 5 months later, it's the start of the season. And I just said, look, I'm still here. I'm still very much interested. And at that moment, he said, well, you're very fortunate because we are just in 2 weeks about to put one on the market. It's out here on the hard right now. Would you like to have a look? I said, I'll be there in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And I came down, and I think I offered 24 hours later.
Wow.
And so that's how fast. I mean, this never made it to market, and I believe that's quite common.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons, by the way, when we touch back on the Nordhaven, they had nothing for sale.
Right.
We did go and see this because we wanted to do some comparisons and have a really good thing.
There just wasn't any
They
stock.
had nothing.
Yeah.
No.
And so it became almost de facto. I came on board, I took a look at it. It had been a little bit, I'm saying that because of lockdown and because the owners had sort of, they hadn't gelled with it, or their other halves hadn't gelled with it. Which I can get.
Yeah.
Then they'd done some great work in the pilot house and so forth with the upgrades and so forth, but the boat had been sort of left unloved for about a year, and so we needed to refresh it, and it took a lot of convincing. But the key words to Pam were, let's own it for 1 year. If you are not in love with it, within the first year we will sell it.
Right.
And I
That was the
believe we
promise.
should be able to sell it for what we bought it for.
Yeah.
Probably close enough.
Yeah.
So,
That's quite a commitment, and that's a good commitment,
Well,
actually,
yeah,
isn't it? Because at least you get to try it.
yeah.
Yeah, so we did that, and eventually we bought it, and we spent a while just considering, even before we bought it, what exactly we would do to refurb it that wouldn't take away from the fact that it was a Fleming,
Mm-hmm.
but would still make the boat, I suppose, glow. It
Right.
really just make it back to make it shine again.
Yeah.
And we decided that would be the reupholstery, the new carpets, the new bedding, and just new covers.
And the upholstery on the flybridge as well.
Yeah, we did that, and new covers.
I think at one
everywhere,
point,
new bimini.
we nearly went down the path of a complete refit.
Yeah.
And when we spoke to the chaps at Fleming, they warned us very strongly about moving too far off base.
Right.
They said because Fleming owners will expect to see this kind of thing, and if you're going to go off base, so that was one of the things we had to constrain, if you like, our thinking was, because if we'd made this commitment to sell it, if we don't love it, then we can't change it so much that it becomes unsellable.
Of course.
And we did talk to some refit people about it, but we didn't feel comfortable doing that in the end. So I think we've done the right thing.
So we made the commitment, and we had the refurb, and I think I just gradually, the more we came on board, the more we went out, even in the Solent, the more I just began to appreciate things like the visibility that you can have.
It's sensational.
It's just like fantastic, because you
You
look
don't
out.
get the impression here in the marina because you're surrounded by boats.
Yeah.
But once you're out on the water, being at here, you have that, 270 degree angle from here, and it's just an amazing view. I've never, unless you're actually out on the flybridge of another boat, or you don't see it from the saloon normally.
No, but also if I was in the kitchen, which I have to say is also, it's I've appreciated how well equipped it is over the period of time that we've had it, and especially going on a long journey, and the storage it provided us. But the views, for me, actually being able to see out, that just felt so great, and that was a huge thing that sort of started to win me over in my feeling towards the boat. It was the lightness, I think. And then I think that the more that we've used it, the more I've appreciated things like the fact that there are 5 different areas on the boat that you can socialise in or utilise for people to be in separately if they wanted to be, or we could all move around within them. And we've got this space, we've got the back deck, we've got the pilot house, we've got upstairs, and then we've also got the front on the Portuguese bridge.
Yeah.
And front of the Portuguese bridge, and of course you've still got a cabin that you can retreat to.
Oh
if you
yeah,
want
that's
to.
true.
Yeah.
So,
but I think that we had at one point on our trip, we had 3 of our boys and 2 partners and a dog on the trip, and I think they're all adults taking up space as it were, but it was perfect. And we were all moving around quite comfortably. Nobody felt on top of each other. And
I think one aspect of the boat that you can get as various options as well is, and you see it on some of the others, you can get extended boat decks, which actually mean that the cover over the cockpit area is another a metre and a half covered over by its roof, which would allow you then to fit camper covers all around it, so that the rear deck there becomes more enclosed space. Now, I've met and seen owners who absolutely love that. However, for us, we realised that whilst we were out, it's great. You can put swimming equipment, snorkeling equipment, scuba equipment on the back, use it as a working back deck rather than an extension of this cockpit, of this saloon, because in reality there are enough indoor spaces.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't think, I was glad that we hadn't gone down that route, and because we were thinking you can add it on if you wanted to. It's quite an expensive option, but you can add it on, but I don't think we'll do that now, will we?
No, I think having used the space, particularly when we were in Scotland, and we've got the boys who were out snorkeling or scuba diving or whatever, and the dog, it was just perfect, really, to just accommodate all the kit and caboodle that comes with them.
Yeah.
But
so Scotland.
Yeah, I'm keen to hear about Scotland. So you based the boat, first of all, to say we're in the Hamble, in Southampton, so right in the middle of the south coast. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't stayed here, has it?
No. I mean, the story behind this is quite simple. We live about 40 minutes away from here, so this is a convenient place to keep it. But it also happens to be the location that the boat was when we bought it.
Okay.
So we acquired the berth as well. Now, a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to cross the Atlantic on a sailboat with a friend of mine, and he had harboured some ambitions to go cruising the west coast of Scotland. So I said, well, now I've got this boat, we should do that. We'll go together. So the plan was that we'd both go up for May and June, and he would get back in time for the Around the Island race at the beginning of July. And I wasn't as constrained by that, but on the other hand, I thought, well, let's do that. And so we looked into what it would take. Now, again, coming back to the Fleming, which, 8 knots and 16 to 20 litres per hour at that speed, that meant that we could probably do the whole thing in a fraction of what it would have taken in the Sunseeker of the past, or any of those, because we're not consuming those kind of numbers. So the longer distance became a feasible option. And so, yes, the plan was to go round Cornwall, the Lizard and Land's End, and then potentially over to Ireland, the east coast of Ireland, and work our way up there before hopping back across over to Scotland, up at the channel up there. And we got as far as Falmouth before we encountered some bad weather, which kept us there for about 5 or 6 days. And at that time, that put us back in terms of our schedule, and therefore other people arriving for their leg of the journey and so forth. So we did what we could to recover, and that was to actually have an assisted passage with a company who provided us with a skipper and a mate to help us go straight from Falmouth to Largs in one shot.
Wow.
So that was a 48-hour journey. And that's what we did. So these two chaps came, and they're both from the RNLI, as it turned out. One of them had been both on crew in the RNLI, one of them actually a helmsman. And so he and I and the mate, we then took turns for the next 48 hours and took it all the way to Largs.
So how many miles is that?
That's a very good question. That leg must have been about 600, was it?
I was going to say that, yeah.
That leg must have been 600. I'm not quite sure, but
wow.
It's in that order, and it took us 48 hours, or 47, 48 hours.
Yeah.
And we experienced some horrific weather actually going across the Bristol Channel.
Felt like a baptism by fire.
The weather gods did not favour us at all. They did not behave or do as predicted, and we'd waited for 5 days for the weather to turn. It did turn, but not in the Bristol Channel. We found some, to our cost, we found some, wind over tide situations, and it built up significantly. We think we had 5-metre waves on the nose.
Wow.
And so there were a few ill people. I wasn't one of them. The boat took it like a trooper, which is one of the reasons I was very glad to be in it.
Yeah.
The RNLI guys were very glad to be in it too. But we got through that. Then we got into probably about 14 hours of fog in the middle of the Irish Sea, and
it was not without feeling the ability to feel terrified that trip.
Right.
I think Garth and I had gone and done a safety at sea course before we left. So we'd been in the pool, we'd done the
jumping
getting into the life raft,
right,
stuff like that.
And it was bad enough doing that in all the kit in a swimming pool, getting in and out to a life raft.
Yeah.
And there were moments when the boat was crashing so loudly, or the noises of the boat were crashing so loudly with the waves, that all I could imagine was the boat breaking in two and being in the sea and thinking, oh my God, that was terrifying.
Well, strangely enough, this didn't happen.
No, it was just my imagination.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% of that. I'm very similar in airplanes.
Yeah, I'm not good in
I have
airplanes.
huge imagination when I'm in airplanes.
I've never experienced anything like that before.
Yeah.
Well,
but the boat took it all in her stride.
Took it all in her stride. Nothing came loose.
It was
this
the
is
humans that didn't.
There were a couple of humans. We had to do a little bit of sleeping back here, and for some people, because there was no sleeping up the front.
Yeah, of
until
course.
we'd passed through the worst of it.
Yeah.
I got a few hours sleep in the front cabin, but I learned to do that whilst airborne, at least 50% of the time. So,
yeah.
But we had the boat came through at flying colours. It was just so capable. You'd never do that intentionally, but that's why we bought it, is to have it as that capable boat that you could rely on if you ever got caught out. And we did get a little caught out there.
But I just think after that, I felt really, really secure with the boat, because it had demonstrated just how capable it was. So that really was another sort of layer of one of the reasons why I became so enamoured, or am so enamoured with the boat. It's just yet another one.
But when we got to Largs, sort of everything changed really. We then had one of the most glorious patches of weather that the Western Isles have ever seen. The Irish Sea. Who'd have thunk it? After last night's 5-metre waves. So we then went from Largs round to Oban, through the Crinan Canal.
Wow.
Which was a lovely trip. It's a bit big to stick through the Crinan, but she worked fine through there, and it was lovely. We hired a pilot, a young lady who helped us go through all the locks, so we weren't climbing up and down locks, or more importantly, you weren't, because I was driving.
But once you were through the locks, which actually was quite beautiful in itself at
beautiful
points,
trip.
Beautiful scenery, but it was sort of a meandering canal almost, from that point to the point of actually reaching the sea lock at Crinan, and it was just like being in sort of Tales of the Riverbank.
It was very different experience from what we just encountered. So
very.
So out of there and then up to Oban, which became, if you like, a little hub for our friend John. John, our friend, he'd gone ahead in his sailboat, because he'd had a crew that were already intending to do, a watch pattern, so he was doing the longer distances. We'd elected just to do day sails, and until we got so behind schedule that we had to hire these chaps. But once we got to Oban, we had a great time and spent a few days there. Took on our I think was that Tom got off and the kids got on, didn't they?
Yeah.
So at that stage we had 4 of our, 2 boys and 2 of their other halves, and a dog. So there was 6 of us and dog on board for a couple of weeks, and then from there we went up to Skye and Plockton, which was absolutely, really, really lovely place. Then along from Skye, I can't remember the name of that place we went to en route, but then across to the Outer Hebrides, which we did via the Shant Islands, which are this amazing wildlife preserve. Now, this is the Little Minch, which is notorious for its sea state and tidal issues and so forth. It was absolutely benign for us while we were there.
Yeah.
And we went snorkeling in the Shians, and an amazing experience to go snorkeling with a GoPro, whilst razorbills and puffins are diving and swimming underneath you.
Wow.
So it was just sensational.
Like they're flying underwater when you actually put your face in.
And this is
amazing.
we hadn't. I think that was about the beginning of June, end of May, wasn't it?
Yeah, they got on the 20th, I think it was. So it was about a few days into that. But we also went to the Treshnish Islands.
We did before we went over, didn't we?
Yeah, that was quite another bird sanctuary area. But it felt like you were in some kind of David Attenborough documentary. It was so incredible.
Well, of course, we went to
when we were in the Shiants.
The other island was Staffa, which is the other end of the Giant's Causeway from Northern Ireland, and Fingal's Cave and all that kind of stuff, and it's just amazing. Anchored off there, able to go around in the tender and take a good look at the caves and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but going over to the Outer Hebrides, it was the landscape's quite different. It's denuded of trees, but it's very wild and so forth. But we had a lovely time up there in Harris, where we went and stayed, and
every island has a gin distillery.
Or
its own gin version.
Horrifically,
and so we made sure that we sampled those.
We did.
When in Rome.
Well, you say because we should have been drinking Scotch, but I'm half Scottish and I can't take whiskey at all. That's not my thing. So I'm a bit ashamed about that, but I can't. But anyway, so we went to a lot of gin distilleries instead. And the one on Harris, which is actually becoming a Scotch distillery. In fact, they sell their first Scotch bottles on the 23rd of September this year. And they have a lovely distillery there and a lovely gin. But we spent time there. They couldn't accommodate us in the marina. We were thinking that we might. Well, it wasn't a marina, but the harbour that the boys were not something we could moor up on. Apart from one spare RNLI mooring buoy, and they very kindly allowed us to stay there for 3 or 4 nights.
Wow.
And we were tied up to an RNLI buoy, and that was great. So one of the things we wanted to do was visit the other side of Harris, the Atlantic coast side, because of the beautiful beaches we'd heard about. But unfortunately, they wouldn't take dogs on the bus. So as a result, we were pretty hacked by that, to be fair. As a result, we decided to change our route slightly. And the next day, we went through the Sound of Harris, which is a very tricky bit of nav to do, but it's really quite fun. And then went back north up the Atlantic side of Harris and snuck in between Harris and the island of Taronsay. Now, Taronsay is where they did the first of the castaway things.
I think it was Survivor with
Was
Ben
it Survivor?
Ben Fogle.
Right, okay.
But there's a very famous beach on that west coast of Harris called Luskintyre Beach. And all the photographs that you see of the sort of beautiful white sands and the tropical waters, or tropical looking waters, are Luskintyre Beach, which is where we were originally heading for. But then we spotted this sandy spit, effectively coming out into the sea, this sandbar, and it
meant that if the swell was coming from the north, you'd stay on the southern side of it. If it was coming from the south, you'd stay on the northern side. So you always got some shelter. And we were the only people on the island, the only people there. It was looked like the Caribbean. Bright white sandy beaches, aquamarine.
Or the Bahamas either. Yeah. I mean, it was just
aquamarine seas, just beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful. And we all got off and explored and just had a picnic lunch on the beach, and it was just the most stunning experience, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think from there we started to wend our way home. Really, that was about as far away as we got. So we were then thinking, right, we'll make our way home, and we let one of our passengers off who flew out of Benbecula airport there, and flew back to Glasgow and then back to England. But the rest of them carried on, and then we took a trip back all the way down to Barra. Had a very nice Indian meal on Barra. Sounds bizarre, but there is a very funky Indian restaurant there in Castle Bay, where we were escorted in with a troop of bottlenose dolphins, which are just amazing.
Absolutely beautiful.
And then so we went from Barra back to back to Oban, let the rest of the passengers off, got another passenger on.
But we also stopped at a number of other small islands like Vatersay and Eriskay, and en route as well. And we saw lots of these little islands because there are just so many.
And lochs to stay in. In fact, we have some great friends who live in
Port Appin.
Port Appin. So we went and saw them a couple of times as well, and took them out, stayed overnight in lochs nearby.
Yeah.
And just fantastic. But by the time we got to Oban, we then had our last guest on board who'd flown over from the USA. And she came on board in the middle of, basically 11 o'clock by the time the train arrived at Oban after her huge journey. And we took her on our tender, which was over there, picked her up and brought her over to Kerrero, which is a little island where the marina is in Oban. And she acclimatised there, and then off we set. And, went down to the end of Mull. What's that area called?
Well, first of all we went to Tobermory.
We did.
We went to that part of Mull. We went to Tobermory, had a night there, and then we went back to Loch Allen, had a night there.
We did.
Quick refuel in Oban. And then we went back down to the south west, I think, of
southeast of Mull, right at the end,
Mull, to another beautiful white little beach.
It's very near Iona.
And that was one that we visited without the kids. We had a few days on our own, and we met up with our friends in their sailboat in Iona. And again, staggeringly beautiful, sunny weather, gorgeous white beach, tropical waters, and the most incredible sunsets. That just, we got the most amazing pictures. Too many superlatives there. It was just mind-blowing, really.
I mean, we saw the Misty Isles too. Let's get that right. I mean, we saw castles in that sort of cool mist of the morning on quiet lochs where you wouldn't, see another soul.
That was
but we also saw the other stuff. Yeah, Loch Moidart was.
And then we were in Portree in Skye for 3 or 4 nights, and we went and did the hike up to the old man at Store. That was very much the Misty Islands, absolutely rained upon and everything else, but just still brilliant. Still brilliant to be able to do that.
A lovely trip.
The biggest thing I noticed that was a challenge when you were on the boat and you got off the boat on an island. If it was tiny, or you were just walking, you were actually in the town, that was fine. But if you wanted to get anywhere other than that particular town or destination on the island, because you suddenly didn't have any transport, that was actually quite interesting, because it's a challenge you just don't think about facing with old cars and everyday life. And suddenly we found ourselves a bit more
especially in some of those areas that taxi services are non-existent. You're relying maybe just on somebody giving you a lift, and or public transport, which there may or may not be. So so finally, I think we've been away for about 6 weeks by this time, haven't we? And now it was time to start thinking about getting home, and we really still didn't have a great plan for what it was going, because by this stage we knew where we had to get to, but everything else now was weather dependent. And so we took a look at it, and we went from Mull one day, missed the tide, which would have sent us through the Sound of Isla But we decided, in fact, we'd just go straight to Northern Ireland. So we did quite a long day that day.
To Ballycastle.
To Ballycastle in Northern Ireland. And had a lovely time in Ballycastle. They were very, very sweet people. Went straight to the local pub. Pam was shown how to pour a pint of Guinness. And we had just a lovely time there. But we're only there for one night because, again, we needed to make tracks now. And the next night, we decided that we would head to.
Well, we initially thought we'll just go down the coast of Ireland and work out where we're going to stay, see how far we can get, really. And then again, the sea gods were so kind to us.
Well, I said we've got to cross. We've got to, so 3 hours into the journey, I turned to the guys and said, "Well, look, let's push on and cross the Irish Sea here because it's like a mill pond."
You'd paid your dues on the way up, obviously.
Pardon?
You'd paid your dues on the way up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we were perhaps going to go around towards Dublin and down there, but we thought, let's take the opportunity to cross. Nearly there. Crossing the Irish Sea. ETA about 11 o'clock at Anglesey tonight. How smooth is that? And so we went to where was it?
Holyhead.
Yeah,
on
Holyhead.
Anglesey.
Now Holyhead had a bit of a tragic past. In I think 2018 they were hit by a very bad storm and the marina was wiped out.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And but it's a very big harbour, and they've only started really to rebuild it. And we were going to get there late. I mean, late. And by the time we got there, it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, pitch black. We couldn't really see very much.
We had really scant details of quite where we were meant to be.
No, because the marina really wasn't operating very well. So we went in there and using the searchlight and the radar in harbour mode, we navigated our way around all the mooring buoys and all the boats that were in there, found a pontoon to tie up to, and stayed there overnight, filled up with water and scarpered the next morning.
But it was only next morning you could see the devastation.
Yeah.
It was just, pontoons which were just still half immersed in the water, all broken.
So I think it was Padstow, wasn't it?
No, well, yes. No, it wasn't actually. Sorry. It was Carnarvon.
You're so right. You're so right. So we went. So one of the things that we did when we got to Holyhead, obviously, it was.
It had been.
It wasn't very picturesque, It's more of a commercial, and it had been a long day. So we woke up quite late and got there. And Pam said, "Well, is there somewhere nice we can stay tonight?" And we looked at the maps and we looked at the books, etc. And Carnarvon was the one. So we went round into the Menai Straits, across a sandbar, which you can only cross 2 hours, which was quite an interesting passage as well. It was quite. Yeah, actually trying to spot the navigational marks was quite tricky, but we did, and went into Carnarvon. And it's basically the tidal stream goes past. It's what's it called? The Victoria Lock, is that what it's called? I think it is called Victoria Lock in Carnarvon. It's right next to the castle. It's extremely beautiful, and recommend anybody visits it.
It's a medieval town or city,
walled town.
It's just gorgeous.
And it's on the Menai Straits, and there's quite a decent tidal stream going in there. You can only get in and out of it 2 hours either side of high tide. And so we went in there, and we were just getting our fenders ready and so forth. And I realised the tide was moving us around quite significantly, and the entrance to the harbour is only that big. And so we made a run at it, nearly round the side of the entrance. So that was quite fun. A close call, and I spoke to the guys afterwards. They said, "Yeah, you've no idea how many people hit the sides going in." So, so watch that if you're ever going up there. But we got through safely.
Very pretty.
Very pretty.
Very lovely people.
Stayed there just one night, though, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We had a good chance to look around the town and the castle, and that was lovely and gorgeous weather. very dramatic sort of clouds, and
and you're right
as you approach the castle, but you've got the sort of backdrop of Snowdonia. It's just very dramatic scenery.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Beautiful.
So next morning it was out across the sandbar again, on the way out, and this time we've got a long journey ahead of us, I think.
Well, we thought we were going to go to, is it Haverford? Not Haverfordwest. Where was that place? In order to sort of do the hop to the across the Bristol Channel. Again, still part of Wales. Can't think.
I can't recall any of that.
Yeah, so
But I do know that what we ended up by deciding to do.
Yeah.
Came out of Carnarvon, and effectively we decided, well, let's just go for it. Straight. The weather's great. Cross the Bristol Channel. Let's do a 24-hour one with me and Pam and Kay, our friend from America, and we did a 24-hour journey down straight to Padstow.
Wow!
And it was actually really quite a straightforward session, really. The Bristol Channel was benign to us this time, and we did some work on the radar, made sure we were all in tune. We used the pilot berth by the helm there, so I was able to catnap.
But I think one of the biggest things I've learnt about boating in the UK compared to the Med is, obviously when you're in the Med you don't have to consider tides.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously still have wind,
but
you don't have tides. And you also, well, we never did the sort of overnight boating when we were in the Med either, but I think that with the radar and the AIS and everything, you can generally spot where boats are, and you know, even if it's night time. However, we have learnt so much about trying to navigate around fishing boats, because so many fishing boats are out there, and they don't actually they switch their AIS off if they have it, and you can spot some boats on radar, but what they are and what they're doing, and it is actually quite disconcerting, especially at night time when you can just see blips on the radar, but you're not sure what
Well, some of the boats are really small, and you know.
We had an incident where a boat which didn't appear on radar, wasn't on AIS, and suddenly
there was a searchlight straight at us about 100 yards away, because you could see we were bearing down on him.
Yeah.
Now he had lights on, but his lights were directly in line with an AIS target, which was about 2 miles away.
Oh.
And so we saw both sets of lights.
Yeah.
And they were right on each other.
Yeah.
And suddenly he turned his lights on. Absolutely zero on radar.
So
so we stopped pretty quickly there.
Yeah.
Skirted around it.
It's quite a different learning curve.
Yeah.
Having to, well, for me it has been, and actually being responsible on the watch at some point on my own, even with Garth just asleep there. That was quite a first.
I don't think I was out for any more than about 20 minutes at any moment in any time. You know, so, everything okay? Yeah, fine. And then another cat now.
Yeah.
And of course you can't do that for very long, but for a long day, or you know, one 18-hour day, it's perfectly okay.
And then we arrived in Padstow for sort of 8:30, 9 o'clock the next morning.
Yeah.
And it was just glorious. We sort of cruised into the sunshine and the smell of Cornish pasties.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And and they put us right on the town quay, right in the centre. So as we came up off the boat, because the tide was down, we were basically coming out next to the people in the car park.
Right.
Parking their cars there.
Yeah, because again, that's another lock gate. It's another lock gate. So so you're not going up and down with the tide, but you still have to use ladders to get up and off the boat.
Yeah.
But it's it's perfectly good for a couple of nights that we were there.
Yeah. No, it was lovely. Padstow is glorious again.
And then it was Padstow to Falmouth.
Well, it was. We went round Land's End. And
because that's what we really had wanted to do on the way up. When we, Falmouth and then around Padstow, but we never got the opportunity, so we did it the other way around. And Land's End and the Lizard were again.
But we did the Helford River this time because we couldn't get.
That's right. There was so much traffic in Falmouth with I think what was it, the Armed Forces weekend.
Yeah.
And they had all kinds of regattas, no room at the inn. In that was almost unbelievably. So we anchored in the Helford River, and went up and went out to one of the pubs up there. Was it the ferry?
Yeah, we've got some friends that live there, so that was nice. Hooked up with them. And
so yeah, there's a lovely little pool at the top of the Helford River, which we were able to get to. And after you go through all the mooring buoys, that was one of the things. This boat was really too heavy to go on virtually all of the mooring buoys that we encountered anywhere, with the exception of that one RNLI one over in
Skye. Was
it Skye?
So
so most of the time we were at anchor or in a marina, but when we were in the Outer Hebrides, we were always at anchor really.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, then Falmouth we obviously didn't get to go back to, which was a shame because one of the other Fleming owners that we'd encountered in Falmouth had lent us some fenders to help us get through the Crinan Canal. And I still have them on the top of the boat there, which I've failed to return to him, so we're going to have to pop down to Falmouth at some point during the summer to return them. But once we left the Helford, then it was, what's the next stop after that? Oh, Dartford.
Dartmouth.
Dartmouth, not Dartford. So Dartmouth, where we stayed for 3 nights.
4 nights.
4 nights.
Yeah, glorious.
That was good weather, wasn't it? That's when I bumped into you and you told me about the boat, and I said we need to do a meet the owner.
Yeah, and it was just such a glorious weekend.
Yeah,
it's just beautiful. And there's Dartmouth is so pretty and so much to see and do.
Yeah, it is a wonderful spot.
Yeah, it really is. So that was lovely. And then
the final hop home, I guess.
And the final hop home again, great, very nice weather. Really kind to us.
Yeah, we did it in one, didn't we?
We did it in one from Dartmouth up to here, and I think we left about, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning, 8:30, something like that.
Got here about 8.
And we got
for 12 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was 12 hours.
Yeah, we had the advantage of the, and we stayed well away from Portland, as most people do. Some of the yachts that were doing the same kind of passage, they took the inside passage. But we'd taken the inside passage, funnily enough, when we got out, which and that was because our first night away from here on the way up was in Portland, and so we'd left Portland early in the morning, done the inside passage and caught the tide. This time we stayed well offshore, and the only foul tide that we had was when we were in the Solent. We just had a couple of knots against us all the way up the Solent, but all the way across Lyme Bay, it was all with us, so it was good.
Yeah, it was really good, and coming round the Needles is always so impressive.
Yeah, and a sense you're home, I guess, as well.
Well, yeah. We did look at it and think, crikey, do you remember? It was it was just 8 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? Just over 8 weeks.
Yeah, that we left.
Right. And do you know how many miles you did?
Yes. 1,960.
Just roughly.
I'd asked him the same question.
And the reason I felt like doing a quick lap of the Isle of Wight so we could have seen more
so then 2,000,
but no, so it was close to 2,000.
Wow, in 8 weeks. Yeah. That's fantastic. A hell of an adventure.
It was, yeah.
And what would you say you've learned?
Well, I think mainly that we are able to do the voyages and manage tides, which is something that was quite new to us. Planning your passages based on tidal streams has always been something I thought was more to do with yachting than it was to do with motorboating, and it had never been a concern for us before, but of course it is when you're travelling at 8 knots. And so consequently it's a big deal, and not unexpected, but we had to therefore work on it and do all that. I mean, I did my yacht master theory courses all before we left, and so we knew all that stuff that was going to confront us. But yes, there was that. I learned about the capabilities of the boat. That was very reassuring. I believed it, and it's warranted belief. So that was great.
Yeah.
Also that we could do stuff, and the pair of us. I mean, that was the other thing. We want a boat that the pair of us can manage.
Yeah.
And this boat is very easy to manage with 2 people.
Yeah.
It is, actually. It's far easier to manage this boat than it was to manage the Sunseeker that we had.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's much lower for a start, isn't it? You can literally get on and off it easily and that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, because that's right. Instead of a passerelle, going to the rear, we're virtually always alongside a finger, and we're just walking straight off and on the deck.
But I think it's just the capability for the bow thrusters to sort of help move you on or off the dock.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so responsive.
Yeah, the stern thrusters on this. Well, we didn't have a stern thruster on there.
Right, but it is so responsive. I find that when we're going into anywhere, you've got such great ability to control the boat.
Yeah,
and it's just a lot easier. There's no panic. You can get off the boat. You can have all the ropes ready, and it's just, I think, a lot calmer for me. I feel that way.
We've also worked on it. There's one very, very important piece of kit though that you must have. Should I go get it?
I don't know.
Sounds intriguing.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
You know what it is.
Oh yes, actually that's true. Yeah, we invested in some headsets. And
I'm not paid by these people, but this is a great piece of kit.
No, I have to say,
we have 3 of them, and it makes a huge difference.
I can totally get that. That's brilliant.
And particularly if you're inside the cab, the pilot house here, rather than up on the flying bridge, and just have a calm conversation. We use these all day long when we're going through the Crane Canal.
We did.
And they lasted all day long too.
And even just the distances when I was off the boat.
This doesn't work. This isn't Bluetooth. They have their own proprietary radio system.
I think
these apparently are used in the sort of theatre industry as well.
Oh, okay. What make are they?
These are called EarTech.
Okay.
I think they're incredibly helpful to the harmony of a marriage.
Okay.
We had. In fact, we had to. Another Fleming 58 owners saw us using them as we were leaving or arriving somewhere, and they came up and said, "What was the name of that? What are those things you're using?"
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I learned was you can plan and you can plan, and you can make all sorts of plans, and you should definitely, and you should research, but you have to be flexible.
Right. Yeah. Of course.
And you have to be prepared to change your plans according to the weather and time.
Yeah, you can't fight the weather, and that's definitely something I've learned over years of boating. You cannot fight the weather.
For me, is boating in the UK. That's what I've learned from this trip. But it's just, I think, just go and have fun and dare to do it.
Yeah.
I think that is it, really, because I think I felt quite apprehensive, but I feel now, I feel like we could tackle just about most things.
Yeah, I think maybe next time, we think we might be going up to Sweden, if not next year, the year after.
Nice, that'd be lovely.
So, it's a bit more of a long haul, so...
It's just that the journey there is...
It's getting there, isn't it?
Yeah. But, going around the Swedish...
Well, it's actually Scotland felt like a long way.
Yeah, no, of course.
Scotland did. I think if we went back to Scotland, I think I'd like to crawl up the... First of all, I'd give myself 3 weeks to get there.
Yeah.
That's what I'd do before I had entertaining anybody arriving on the boat or scheduled arrivals.
Yeah.
Give myself, especially at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
And I'd like to work at the east coast of Ireland and do that. That's what I'd like to do next time.
Yeah.
Last question. Pam, is the Fleming staying?
Yes. I have fallen completely in love or under her spell.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. I think just so many aspects of the boat are so brilliant, and it really does feel like a home from home when you're on the boat and on your journeys. So it's brilliant.
Fantastic. That has been Superb. Thank you so much for spending the time and talking us through that. I think that's really interesting. It's great to talk to people who've really used the boat. And yeah, that's a great story. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick.
So that's it. That's about the size of that. Let me know what you think in the comments as ever. But I think it's been really fascinating. And we would look forward to catching you on another one of these real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.